When Daphne asked me to give this talk, she said, "Oh, don't worry. Just tell everybody how you got to where you are today." Well, I'm not doing that. I'm absolutely not doing that. But when she said that, did make me think back to one experience that I am going to share with you. I hearken back, after Daphne said that, to the early 1970s, which was the dawn of what we used to call then women's lib. And my mother was an early participant in consciousness-raising groups. Nobody in our town had ever heard of consciousness-raising group. This was a very new thing. At that time in the public schools, the answer keys to the vocational testing assessments were still gender-coded. And when I was 16 and took my vocational assessment and I went and handed it to the counselor, he took out what must have been the girls' answer key to the voc assessment, and he looked at it and he said, there are two good choices for you. You should either be a nurse or a social worker. And I thought, okay, I don't know how long his list was of potential occupations for girls. I don't think it was a lot longer than nurse, social worker, and teacher. So he gave me 2 out of the 3 things in the world to do that I could pick from. So since being a social worker didn't really appeal, I went home to my mother and I said I was going to be a nurse. And I don't want to offend any nurse or social worker in the group because they're honorable professions. But I told her I was going to be a nurse, and my mom looked at me and she said, no. She said, nurses take orders. She said, you want to be a doctor. They give the orders. Well, I was 16 years old, and the thought of giving orders to anybody, including the family dog, was just way beyond me. So I couldn't quite go where Mom wanted me to go. If you ask my kids and my husband and the family dog today, a few years later, I think they would tell you that I have figured out how to give the orders. But that's not what I'm going to talk about, how I got to be where I am. What I wanted to do was follow up on the part of the program that Daphne told me she put me in, which was called Building Community. And my message today is that all too often, building a strong and resilient and successful community is not feel-good work. It is wonderful to have people come in who have been brilliantly successful, done all the right things right off the bat, and everything has been easy. But in real life, failures happen and mistakes happen, and it is hard for organizations to acknowledge those mistakes and figure out how to fix them. And organizations that do the natural human thing, which is to be shielded from the consequences of their failures, become fat and sloppy, and they forget how to do what they were made to do in our society. When the world heads the wrong way, as it will inevitably head the wrong way, organizations that have forgotten how to learn from their mistakes will be ruthlessly exposed and be shockingly fragile. So I'm going to give you 2 examples from my business and professional life, and philanthropic life that I share with my husband, the love of my life. Just after the 2 of us got married, in October of 1987, the stock market dropped several hundred points in a single day. Back then, that was considered to be a major event for the stock market to drop a couple 100 points in a single day. Governments and central banks around the world swung into action. I think I see Scott Nickham back there. He knows what I'm talking about. Young central banker by the name of Alan Greenspan, who ran our Federal Reserve, got on the job. He flooded the markets with easy money, and immediately all the stock prices went right back up. The next day, the stock market had one of the best days it had ever had in history. He saved many financial companies from bankruptcy and ruin. But that was the first time of many, many instances over the next 18 years where he would do exactly the same thing. And I am here to tell you that the financial companies, including my own, got fat and sloppy and forgot how to do serious work, and we thought we were geniuses because everything always worked out. And when there was a problem, nobody ever suffered the consequences and went bust because Alan Greenspan was there for the rescue. He was so successful, in fact, that when he retired in 2005, he gave a speech about how he had tamed the business cycle. There would be no more ups and downs of the economy in the new world. And Time magazine was so excited by all of this that they put him on the front cover of their magazine one day when there actually were physical magazines, and they named him one of the 3 people on the committee to save the world. So this was all considered to be a very grand success. But in reality, the mistakes and excesses of businesses and bond buyers and home buyers and investors and lenders were just bubbling underneath the surface of this completely false stability where nobody ever had to suffer the consequences of mistakes. Natural corrective actions had been short-stopped. That was 2005. I think most of the people in the room over the age of 9 know what happened in 2006 through 2008. The mistakes of the 18 fat years came back with a vengeance. I'm the chief financial officer of our family's bank that we own. Every day from 2006 to 2008, I drove to my office wondering what was going to come next. The world found out what the word subprime meant. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac went bankrupt. An enormous company, one of the pillars of the investment banking world, Bear Stearns, went bankrupt and busted in 3 days. They went from being fully in business to being fully out of business. There were lines around the street, around the corners from banks. We hadn't seen that since the Great Depression. And lest we forget, Bernard Madoff's Ponzi scheme was uncovered because in the new world of reality, he couldn't conceal anymore what he was really doing. The cream of the American financial industry had their backs to the wall. Most finance businesses, as I said, ours included, just sailed through the 18 fat years, thinking we were geniuses, thinking we were doing everything just the right way, and not realizing that it was a completely false sense of stability. When someone else compensates for all your errors, you never realize how much you have to fix. Fortunately, the financial crisis came late to the state of Colorado, and we in our company had the time and the ability to recoup and fix our mistakes. A lot of others weren't so successful. A lot of other banks, a lot of other companies, a lot of other homeowners. A lot of people in this country went bankrupt. So when the music stopped, there were way too many players who were unprepared to face the world as it really was. That is not building a strong community. That's a really nice time for a long time, but it is not building a strong community. What we need in this community are resilient organizations who can face their errors and recognize them, as painful as they are, and take steps to correct them before things really get bad. Now that I've managed to offend the nurses, the social workers, the vocational consultants, and some of the bankers here in the audience, I am going to turn to a completely non-controversial topic: organized religion. Okay? But in reality, the story I'm going to tell you, it could be the story of any group of nonprofit organizations. And what is a community? It's a group of organizations, group of governments, group of business, group of nonprofits, and groups of individuals. That's it. That's all a community is. My husband happens to be Jewish. It is well known that many Jewish temples, including many mainline Christian organizations, have been draining money and membership over the last 20 years. Whatever business model it is that they have engaged in isn't working anymore, and people and money are leaving those organizations in droves. In fact, here in Denver, only 20% of the Jewish community receives services from organized Jewish institutions. 20%. I would say 50 years ago, that number was probably a lot more like 70 or 80%. And it suggests to you the depths of the organizational failures here in our communities to meet the needs of the population. So when we moved here to Denver, people knew that we had money and that we were philanthropic, and the Jewish organizations lined up outside our door asking us for money so that they could continue business as usual, just fix the current problems, but business as usual or almost as usual. And that's great. We're very charitable, philanthropic people, and we love to support good causes. But the organizations that were coming to us just had not acknowledged that their model wasn't working. They just wanted to find somebody to let them keep it going. So we struck out in a different direction, and we started our own organization to serve Jewish people in the way that we thought they might want to be served. And we were lucky enough that people like Karen Aviv and Daphne Michelson-Janae and others came, and Sam Walsh came to that organization in droves. And what happened was we were accused of undermining community, not building community. Because lots of people think that building community means supporting me, my organization, and not helping me think about whether the world has changed and whether the organization that I started to go out and do great things is actually still meeting its mission. So the good news that I have to share on that front is that several years after we've started this organization and been really gratified by the response to it, we think that at the end of the day, it did help us striking out in a very different direction, did help those other organizations in our community because they got a no from us, they got a no from a lot of other people, and they had to do some serious soul searching about what they needed to do. And we think that it really helped many of them find their true way forward in a way that continues to be valuable to people in the community. So building really strong and resilient communities is very hard work, both on business and the nonprofit side, but you should never be deterred. Never be deterred. It's where I always choke up when I say this. Remember Margaret Mead. What did she say? Does anybody in the room remember? I see a hand. She said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful and committed people can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. So I didn't follow my mother's instructions to become a doctor, but she did inspire me. And I hope that what I've had today to say to you has given you a little bit of food for thought as well. Thank you.